There are days when the world doesn't just sound loud, it feels loud in your bones, your skin, your breath. Not because someone raised their voice, but because the fluorescent light in the grocery store makes your head ache. Because the hum of the refrigerator, the ping of your phone, the overlapping conversations, they all arrive not like background noise, but like a flood that never asks for permission. And the worst part? No one else seems to notice. They move through the world like it's a breeze, while you're quietly drowning in the wind. This isn't about being dramatic. It's not weakness. It's not something you can shake off. It's sensory overload. A real embodied experience when the nervous system becomes oversaturated with stimuli. It's not just about sound. It's how every light feels too bright, every conversation too fast, every social expectation too loud, even when no one's speaking. And so you begin to withdraw. You turn down the invitation, you cancel the meeting, you avoid the call, not because you don't care, but because your system is screaming for silence, for space, for air. But here's what most people don't understand. You're not being antisocial. You're protecting your sanity. You're not fragile. You're finely tuned. And that's the paradox. Your sensitivity isn't a flaw. It's a form of intelligence. But without understanding it, without boundaries, without care, that same sensitivity becomes a burden. So if you've ever felt like the world was too much, not emotionally, but neurologically, you're not broken. Your brain just needs different rhythms. Your body needs different pauses. Your nervous system speaks in a language that the modern world has forgotten. In this video, we'll listen to that language. We'll decode the overwhelm. We'll learn how to care for a mind that feels too much, not by silencing it, but by learning how to hear it more clearly. Most people think overwhelm begins in the mind, that it's about stress, time pressure, overthinking. But sensory overload isn't about thoughts. It begins before thought. It's pre-verbal, biological, raw. It happens when the nervous system, your most ancient alarm system, starts waving red flags. Not because something is wrong, but because too much is happening at once. Too many lights, too many sounds, too many micro-decisions, faces, details, textures, energies. Too many things you're supposed to process, respond to, regulate. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. Not because you're thirsty, but because you don't know how to shut the pressure off. And in a world that never stops buzzing, your nervous system doesn't get to reset. So it starts to fray. You become jumpy, irritable, exhausted by things that seem small. The wrong music at the cafe, the tag on your shirt, too many browser tabs, someone breathing too loud in the next room. And then the shame comes in, because no one else seems affected. Because you've been told that sensitivity is weakness, that it's just in your head, that you should toughen up. But here's the truth. Sensitivity is not a dysfunction. It's a nervous system tuned to subtleties others miss. It's an antenna that picks up everything, not just danger, but nuance, emotion, microaggressions, energy shifts, contradiction. That's why sensory overload doesn't just happen in crowded malls or noisy streets. It happens in emotionally charged rooms. It happens in conversations where your tone doesn't match your words. It happens when someone says, "I'm fine," but you feel the storm behind their eyes. Your system registers what others discard. And when that's left unacknowledged, unregulated, unspoken, the overload doesn't go away. It sinks in deeper. And that's where it becomes dangerous. Because your brain starts to interpret everything as a threat, not consciously, but physiologically. The lights feel aggressive, the noise feels personal, the requests feel like demands, even kindness feels like pressure. And the only way to survive is to retreat, shut down, or numb out. That's when people start calling you too sensitive, as if noticing more is a flaw, as if empathy is an inconvenience, as if the volume of your perception makes you defective. But the truth is, the world is not built for sensitivity, not the modern one. It's built for speed, consumption, efficiency, and noise. And if you don't fit that mold, it's not because you're broken. It's because you're awake. You are living with the full volume of your perception turned on. And no one gave you the manual on how to care for that gift. So let's pause here. What if your overwhelm wasn't a failure of resilience? but a signal of your depth. What if your system isn't overreacting, but overexposed? What if the real problem isn't you, but a society that forgot how to listen? We are taught to ignore ourselves, to override discomfort, to silence the signals, to push through, smile, and be fine. But the body remembers. The nervous system records everything you pretend not to feel. That tightness in your chest before the meeting? It wasn't nerves. It was your system asking for stillness. The irritation after 3 conversations in a row? Not rudeness, just your threshold being crossed. The problem is, we don't recognize the signs until they scream, because we were never taught how to notice the whispers. We were trained to live in our heads, but overload doesn't begin in thought, it begins in sensation. And the more we disconnect from our bodies, the louder the noise becomes. Carl Jung once wrote that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This isn't just about shadow work or childhood trauma, it's also about nervous system awareness. Because your overload has a language. It speaks through tight shoulders, shallow breath, clenched jaw, twitchy fingers, that creeping urgency for silence. But we've been taught that self-awareness means thinking more, when in truth, the deepest awareness is not mental, it's somatic. It's learning how to feel without panicking, how to pause without guilt, how to notice before you numb. And that begins with one radical act, the permission. Permission to leave the party early, to wear noise-canceling headphones at the grocery store, to take 5 minutes in a dark room without explaining yourself, to say I can't today, not because you're fragile, but because you're finally listening to your own system. Because overload isn't solved by willpower, it's softened by attention, by returning to your body as a place of truth, not shame. And it's here, in these small acts of self-honoring, that something begins to shift. You realize you're not too much. You were just too attuned for environments that reward numbness, and you no longer need to apologize for that. Because strength is not about how much noise you can tolerate, it's about how clearly you can hear your own inner signals before the world drowns them out. When you've been overstimulated for too long, stillness can feel unnatural. Silence can feel suspicious. Rest can feel undeserved. This is what happens when a nervous system lives in defense mode. It forgets what safety feels like. But recovery isn't a luxury. It's the doorway back to yourself. You don't recover from sensory overload by doing more. You recover by doing less, on purpose. By stepping away from urgency. By reclaiming time that isn't monetized, productive, or performative. So let's ask, what does your system need when the world becomes too loud? Not what you've been told to need, not what self-help books prescribe, but what you, in your raw, unfiltered reality, need to feel safe again. Maybe it's 10 minutes in the car before entering the house. Maybe it's turning off all sound for 1 hour a day. Maybe it's lowering the lights, drinking warm tea, and letting your shoulders drop without explanation. These are not indulgences, they are acts of self-regulation, they are micro-movements toward nervous system sovereignty. And yes, the world will not slow down for you, but you can choose your pace within it. You can build rituals that buffer your sensitivity. You can curate your inputs. You can say no to loud places, fast plans, empty conversations. Not because you're rude, but because you're protecting your internal rhythm. And here's the quiet truth most people miss. You don't need to desensitize to survive. You need to recenter. To come home to your own pulse. To live not in reaction to the world, but in relationship with your own capacity. Friedrich Nietzsche once warned of the sickness of modern life, not physical but spiritual. The fatigue that comes not from hard labor, but from constant interruption of the self. He called for a return to solitude, to slowness, to walking for its own sake, to long thoughts, deep breaths, and the space between things. You don't need to become a monk, but you do need to create space in your life where your nervous system can exhale, where no one is demanding anything, where your body can uncurl, where your mind can land. This is not retreat, it's recalibration. And the more you honor it, the more you'll realize you were never too sensitive, you were just misaligned with a world that forgot how to be quiet. You don't need to become louder to be heard. You don't need to become harder to survive. You don't need to force yourself into the rhythm of a world that never pauses. You were not made for constant exposure. You were not built to absorb everything without consequence. You are not weak for needing silence. You are wise for recognizing when your soul needs rest. Because true strength, real confidence, isn't found in how much you endure. It's found in how precisely you listen to yourself, to the signals, to the subtle shifts that most people miss. There's a kind of power that lives in softness, in stepping back instead of pushing forward, in choosing less when the world demands more. It's the power of boundaries, the power of discernment, the power of not betraying yourself to belong, and perhaps most of all, it's the power of not apologizing for your nervous system. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also warned, the soul becomes great when it listens to its own suffering without turning away to listen. Not to the noise, but to the small, sacred hum beneath it. That hum is you. It's not performance. It's not perfection. It's not who you're supposed to be. It's who you've always been, beneath the static, beneath the overload, beneath the pressure to conform. And the more you honor that signal, the more you give it space, attention, protection, the stronger it becomes. You don't need to chase strength. You need to stop leaking energy into everything that dulls your perception. And when you do, something beautiful happens. You begin to feel safe inside your own life. Not because the world became quieter, but because you did. You stopped trying to be what you're not, and started building a world, even a small one, where you can finally exhale. So here's your permission. If no one ever gave it to you, you are allowed to leave the room. You are allowed to need recovery. You are allowed to be sensitive and still be powerful. You are allowed to protect your peace like it's sacred. Because it is.